Beardo Benjo.
Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to today's video. It is officially October, it's Halloween month, it's spooky season. I've got a t-shirt with a skeleton on it. It's just my favourite time of year, and I thought this would be a great time to reassess and reevaluate my top 20 VR horror games of all time. Now I did make a list last year, but things have changed. I've matured, I've played some different games, and you might see some new games in the list that you didn't see last year, if you even saw last year's list. Now, horror is my favourite genre, VR horror is just one of my favourite things in the entire world, and I really do believe that these 20 VR games are the very best within that genre. Now, bear in mind, these are only my personal opinions, so, don't be offended if your favourite game doesn't come up, but put it down in the comments and let me know if I'm missing out on any of the best VR horror experiences out there, because there might be some I haven't played, so make me aware and I will play them. 2022 has actually been a pretty poor year for VR horror games. I don't think there's been any big ones or anything really of note that's come out this year, so I'm really hoping that Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 Retribution comes out in the next few months, and then it will be on this list, hopefully if it's good, next year. Let's get straight into it. These are my favourite 20 VR horror games, the very best I think in the genre right now. In at number 20 is a PCVR hidden horror gem, the eerie and unnerving Organ Quarter. I absolutely loved this game as a fan of Silent Hill. The Silent Hill inspirations ooze from every single pore of this VR horror game. From the creature design, the puzzle design, the world design, and the way that the characters speak to you in strange, vague riddles, this really does feel like the closest thing we'll probably ever get, but hopefully not, to a Silent Hill VR experience. Well worth checking out. In at number 19 is probably one of the best VR co-op horror experiences you can have on the Quest 2. This is Project Terminus, a game that sees you abandoned and stranded in the underground subways of Paris, trying to fight off zombies and a strange electromagnetic entity. Now, when I played this game with Gamertag VR and BMF, we had such a good time that people actually got angry at us. They thought we were making fun of the game because we were laughing so much, but it was testament to just how much fun this game is with friends. Yes, it might not be the most terrifying horror game on this list, but it's a very good one, and if you do want a co-op experience, there aren't many that are this good on the Quest 2 platform natively. In at number 18, one of the very first VR games to truly scare the absolute shit out of me. This is The Forest, a survival game that was built for flat screen and had a VR mode added. Now, most of the game isn't that scary. You use the daytimes to farm for materials, chop down trees, and build yourself a little homestead. But then when the night falls, things get absolutely terrifying. This game is best experienced with friends, mainly because they can hold your hand and keep you sane, but exploring the cave systems of the forest and trying to survive at night is some of the most terrifying VR gaming you can have to date. In at number 17 is Bloober Team's Blair Witch VR. Now, I played this game originally flat screen and I absolutely loved it, but then I went on to play it in VR, and I can confirm VR is the very best way to experience this game. Now, it isn't out and out terror from start to finish. It's more of a psychological horror game that turns the screws on the player as time goes on. But let me tell you this, the final chapter of this game, the final moments of this game are absolutely horrific. Some of the scariest moments I've experienced in VR, and it comes at you thick and fast. I won't give away what happens, but Blair Witch is an absolutely essential must-play VR horror game for any fans of the movie and any fans of horror in general. If you're a fan of Dead Space, or Lovecraftian horror, or The Thing, then you need to play this criminally underrated VR horror game. It's an exclusive to the PCVR platform, it's made by Insomniac, and it's called Edge of Nowhere. This game is a third-person action-adventure horror game that pulls from all of the franchises I just mentioned, but it feels closest to a Dead Space VR experience. It's absolutely sublime and, as I say, criminally underrated. There are a few games on this list that I wish would get Quest 2 ports just to get some more eyes on them and to give them some more exposure, because they deserve more players and they definitely deserve more love. This is definitely one of them. Edge of Nowhere in at number 16. Go and check it out. One of my favourite horror games of all time now in at number 15, Layers of Fear VR. Now I played this one originally in flat screen, much like Blair Witch, but went on to play the VR version much later, and again I can confirm the VR version is so much better than playing it in flat screen. Layers of Fear puts you into the shoes of an artist descending quickly and chaotically into madness, and it's one of the best representations of absolutely losing your mind I've ever seen in any video game, not just in a VR video game. The twists and turns are terrifying, the spooks and jump scares are very much well earned, and it's just a great tale from start to finish. It's a huge shame that Layers of Fear 2 didn't also get the VR treatment. I do still have my fingers crossed, there is still time, I am still hopeful, because more Layers of Fear games are on the way. Layers of Fear in at number 15, a fantastic VR horror experience. At number 14 now, it's Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife from Fast Travel Games. Now this is a VR horror title I was hugely excited for pre-release. I watched every trailer, every piece of gameplay, and I was hanging on the developers' every update about this much anticipated, for me anyway, VR horror release. And then the game came out, I played around an hour and a half, and I was a little disappointed. It felt slow, I wanted more spooks, I wanted more scares, and the community seemed to echo those sentiments. Most of the early reviews said the game was slow, there weren't enough scares, and it didn't get stuck into it quick enough for most players. However, I went back to Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife. I gave it another shot, and I'm so glad that I did. Things get insane in the latter half of this game. The intro is very slow, but if you can push past it and just enjoy the narrative, you will be treated to some of the very best cat and mouse horror sections in the genre right now. The Broken Lady section in particular still haunts me to this day. Absolutely terrifying, but it is slow to start. Bear that in mind. In at number 13, if you're looking for a co-op VR horror game that has a clear objective and challenges you and your group immensely, whilst also providing hilarious jump scare moments and tense gameplay situations, then Devour is for you. This incredibly popular flat screen horror game just recently received a VR update, and the game works beautifully in virtual reality. You need to work with your group of friends to complete objectives whilst being pursued by horrific demonic entities across multiple levels, each with their own unique horrors. With tons of unlockables, huge replay value, and genuinely heart-stopping scares, Devour is worth every single penny. Everyone knows this game, right? In at number 12, it is of course Phasmophobia. Now I think this is another game that would benefit massively from a native Quest 2 port. If they could get this running on the Quest 2, it would be huge for that audience, and I think it would sell like absolute hotcakes. But right now it's just available on PCVR as a flat game or a VR game, and it took the world by storm when it released a few years ago. All of a sudden everyone could live out their wildest ghost hunting fantasies without actually putting themselves in danger or going to any real life terrifying locations. Phasmophobia is one of the best games on this list for continued support. They're always adding new gadgets, new ways to play, new maps, new ghosts, refining the mechanics, making them feel better for VR and for flat screen. The devs are dedicated to making the very best VR horror game, or horror game in general, that they can physically make, and it's clear that they want this to last for years to come. Phasmophobia also treads a beautiful line between being terrifying and hilarious, and I do think that's a key component in any good horror game. This next game is completely free, so no one has an excuse for not playing it. Well, unless you don't have a PC, that's a pretty good excuse. In at number 11, it's Propagation, a short, sweet and pant-shittingly scary VR wave shooter that pits players up against zombies, mutants, giant spiders and some other grotesque creatures in an experience that only takes around 15 minutes to complete. The graphics are stunning, it has native B haptic support, and they even added a paid co-op mode if you need someone to hold your hand. Let's just hope the follow-up game, Propagation Paradise Hotel, can bring the spooks as well. Another criminally underrated VR game up next that deserves a Quest 2 port to really maximise the audience who get to experience it. Number 10 is Wilson's Heart, a stunning narrative-driven horror game that makes the player feel like they're starring in their very own black and white creature feature mystery movie. Filled with amazing moments and spooky set pieces, Wilson's Heart was released during my favourite period of time for VR games. It's when everything was really new and devs were having fun trying to create really engaging, immersive narrative experiences in the medium. We haven't really seen anything like this since, but I would love more games like this. The cast of actors who lent their voice to this one is also incredibly impressive, Alfred Molina and Rosario Dawson to name just two, and it's still one of the most unique VR horror games out there. In at number 9 is one of the oldest VR horror games on this list, but it's still one that terrifies the absolute life out of me. Dread Halls. Now, Dread Halls is available for pretty much every VR platform going, and if you're a horror fan, you owe it to yourself to experience this game. Now, the last time I played this highly replayable dungeon crawling roguelike horror adventure, I spent most of my time staring at the floor because I didn't want to lock eyes with any of the creatures lurking around these dungeons. Now, funnily enough, this isn't the best way to play the game. Dread Halls encourages players to learn through their failure. Learning how to beat and get past each of the creatures requires you to analyse them and figure out what makes them tick. Some will kill you if you look at them, others require you to keep your eyes on them at all times, some will just come straight for you. Hanging out in the Dread Halls is a really horrific way to spend an afternoon. Oh, Resident Evil 7. The game that reinvigorated one of my favourite franchises of all time. Just when everyone thought that all hope was lost. Just when everyone thought that Resident Evil had become a wacky action game rather than a horror game, Resident Evil 7 came in and set the record straight. This game is out and out horror. Yes, it does still have the wacky elements that make Resident Evil so beloved, but it focused in on the horror and the tension and the terror more than anything else. This game has some of the very best moments in the franchise's history. The boss fights are fantastic, the opening sections are tense, and it's best played in VR. Now, the only official way to play Resident Evil VR is to play it on PlayStation VR with a controller, but the best way to play Resident Evil 7 in VR is to use the PCVR Prey Dog VR mod, which gives you full motion controls, allows you to block with your hands physically, allows you to heal yourself, and allows you to shoot and aim manually with motion controls. It is absolutely glorious, and it makes the PSVR version look like a child's plaything. Resi 7 in at number 8. In at number 7, not only one of the best VR horror games, but one of the very best Quest 2 games, full stop, is Doom 3 VR. Now, I'm specifically talking about the Team Beef Quest 2 version here. I do believe that is the best way to play this game in VR. The PCVR mod is also very good, that's the BFG Fully Possessed mod, and then there is also a PSVR version, which is the only official release. However, the Quest 2 version by Team Beef is absolutely sublime. It has full B haptic support, it looks incredible, and it runs beautifully. Now, this is the black sheep of the Doom family. It's the only Doom game that went down that horror route. Every other game in the franchise is just a balls to the wall action shooter, but Doom 3 slowed things down and injected a huge amount of terror into the experience. You really do feel isolated even though you have these huge overpowered guns. The enemies are terrifying and it feels genuinely scary exploring this spaceship all on your own. Doom 3, one of the very best games on the Quest platform. You can play it in VR on PC as well, and you can play it on PSVR, but I do think that Quest 2 version, the Dr. Beef port, is top of the pack. Okay, in at number 6 is Resident Evil 4 VR. Now, Resident Evil is one of my favourite franchises of all time, and Resident Evil 4 is one of my favourite games of all time. I actually don't think I'll be able to play the flat screen version now that I have the VR version. I think it's just that good. I think it's a completely revolutionary, transformative way to play this game. So why is it only at number 6? Well, it just isn't that scary. Yes, technically Resident Evil 4 is a horror game, but I didn't find it scary even in VR with the enemies getting up close and personal. It is more of an action game. This is when the franchise started to turn into an action franchise. It is one of the best games on the Quest. Everyone should own this game. If you have a Quest, you really should experience it. It's phenomenal from start to finish. However, in terms of scare factor, it loses a few points and it drops down to number 6. I still cry about the first time I played Cosmodread. That's right, in at number 5, it's the follow-up to Dread Halls, the sci-fi version of Dread Halls. Cosmodread throws players into an abandoned spaceship or space station and tasks them with surviving over and over and over again against waves of horrific creatures that are lurking in these dark corridors. This game has some incredibly unique systems. You use batteries to power up the lights in certain sections to stop the enemies within those sections from coming back to life, creating routes throughout the spacecraft to ensure your safety as you try to accomplish your objectives and ultimately get back to Earth. The very first time I played this game, I made it to the end of the game. I initiated the final cutscene, and whilst the cutscene was playing, my character ran out of oxygen and I died, therefore not completing the game. It is absolutely brutal, it is absolutely fantastic, and it's essential for horror roguelike fans. Cosmodread is terrifying. Right, we're really getting up there now. In at number 4 is The Exorcist Legion. I cannot wait for the sequel. They are making a sequel to this game and it is going to be co-op. I just really hope that it retains the scare factor, because Exorcist Legion is still one of the scariest VR games I've ever played, and that's why it places so highly on this list. The way the game plays out is kind of like a selection of escape rooms almost, or shorter horror experiences. You visit different locations and undertake case files as a detective, and each location has a demon or a possession or just some horrible ghouls and ghosts to compete with. One of the most horrific levels in this game is set in an attic of a house with a possessed baby. If you haven't played it, I won't say anything else, but it is absolutely nerve-shredding. The entire game is nerve-shredding, and it's just a brilliant version of The Exorcist. When I first heard they'd made an Exorcist VR game, I didn't know how they were going to do it, but it's great that they haven't tried to replicate the film. They've just taken the concept of possession and the concept of certain demons and turned it into just a genuinely pant-wetting experience. Exorcist is right up there. 4th on my list, one of the scariest horror games I've ever played in VR. In at number 3, one of my absolute favourites, Lies Beneath. Now, I'm so happy that we got Resident Evil 4 in VR. I really am. I'm over the moon that happened. It's a huge deal for me. However, if we never got it, if it didn't happen, I'd probably be okay, because Lies Beneath feels so similar to a Resident Evil 4 or the Evil Within experience in VR. The game has a gorgeous and unique sense of style, with visuals that look like they were ripped straight from the pages of a comic book, and it sends players on a trippy journey to figure out exactly what happened to you after a car crash left you stranded in this monster-filled location. The combat is tight and incredibly challenging. It's one of the first VR games I played that didn't feel like it was pulling any punches or going easy on me. The narrative will keep you gripped until the very end, and the final boss is one of the most unique moments, mechanically speaking, that I've encountered in virtual reality. Lies Beneath is definitive proof that developer Drifter should be making many more VR games, preferably horror ones. Coming in strong at number 2 is Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. Now, I've just completed this game for the 3rd time. I played it originally on PCVR, then I checked it out on the Quest, and now I've come back to it on PCVR to play it and complete it in anticipation of the new game, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 Retribution, which I hope is out soon. Please let it be soon. Now, coming back to Walking Dead Saints and Sinners after all this time away, it still holds up. This game is phenomenal, from the visuals to all the systems that have been replicated by so many other VR games since. It really is a trendsetter in the VR industry. The backpack system for inventory, the chunky feeling of pushing a knife into a zombie's skull, the use of your microphone to attract zombies around you, the choices you can make with factions and characters in the world, the crafting. There are so many amazing aspects of Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, and so many of them have been copied and borrowed by other VR games in the years since, and I don't blame them. Saints and Sinners is a truly incredible VR game, and it really is one that all VR owners should play at least once. When I went into it, I went in with very low expectations, because up until that point, movie tie-in and TV tie-in games were garbage. But Walking Dead Saints and Sinners bucked that trend and made something very special indeed. In at number 1 is Alien Isolation, the longest VR horror game on this list, clocking in at around 20 hours if you just play through the campaign. It's also the most tense and terrifying VR game on this list, with a level of polish achieved purely because this is a AAA flat screen experience that's been modded to support VR. Now, it might not have motion controls, it might not feel like the most fleshed out VR experience you'll ever play, but it is still one of the very best in the VR horror genre. Now, you all probably know the story by now. Alien Isolation was set to have some kind of official VR support. They were demoing it at expos to potential customers and using the Oculus hardware to do so. However, it never came to pass. That mode never came to be, and it took some ingenious PCVR modders to bring the VR support back to life, and that's what is now called the Mother mod. You can still get hold of it now, and honestly, Alien Isolation it's just one of the very best. In my opinion, it is the best VR horror experience you can have. 20-hour long campaign, beautiful AAA polish and quality, faithful to the Alien franchise, and just seeing that xenomorph in VR in all its glory is something I won't forget anytime soon. Alien Isolation is an essential VR horror experience for all fans of the genre. And that brings me to the end of my list, updated for 2022. As I say, 2022 hasn't been a great year for us VR horror gamers. We haven't really been treated to many new VR horror games, and that is a huge shame, because I do think this medium elevates horror to a level it just can't achieve in flat screen games, or really even in movies for me anymore. VR horror is the way forward. Now, we do have some great VR horror games on the horizon, and Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 Retribution is still supposed to be coming out this year, so we could get one last big hurrah for VR horror before the end of 2022. Did I miss any of your favourites in this list? Let me know down in the comments below. Please bear in mind, this is my personal list. These are my personal favourites, so I'm not taking away from any of the games that you love. There are plenty of great VR horror games out there. These are just the 20 that I think are more essential than others, personally. Hope you enjoyed, guys. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, and hit subscribe, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Take care.